Okay, for today, we try to conduct hypothesis testing, making use of the t-statistic or the t-distribution. So let's read first the problem given here in our worksheet. So a research student gave out sleep diaries to 10 university colleagues to monitor the number of hours of sleep they have each night. The student believes that on average, her colleagues are having 6 hours of sleep every night. The number of hours of sleep per night for each individual was averaged over a 1 month period. And the results of the research of the student can be seen here in column A under the heading of the variable age. And so the 10 values that are indicated here comprise our data set, which are the values for the monthly averages of the number of hours of sleep every night for the 10 university colleagues. And before we move on to the testing itself, uh, it has to be mentioned that we are making use of the t-statistic specifically because the population standard deviation is unknown in this case. And so instead of using the population standard deviation, we will have to make use of the sample standard deviation. And because of that, we will have to use the t-statistic. And the next thing we have to specify are the hypotheses for the testing. And so we have the null hypothesis, which states that the population average for the number of hours of sleep is equal to 6, as indicated in the problem. Take note that this is also the figure or the value that is assumed by the research student as for the average number of hours of sleep every night. Then we have the alternate hypothesis, which says that um, the population uh, average for the number of hours of sleep is not equal to 6. And before we use the data analysis toolpak of MS Excel, it is worthy to it is noteworthy to note that MS Excel actually can only undertake a t-test, making use of 2 samples. And since we only have a 1 sample set, we have to make a bit of an adjustment in our table of values. And so to that end, I will try to produce another column of values uh, with the heading of D. And the values that I will have to use would have to consist of 2 data values. So again, at least 2 data values. And for purpose of discussion, I will specify the 2 values to be 0. So this should be enough to be able to carry out the t-testing that is provided by the data analysis toolpak. Okay, and so that's it. We are now ready to use, or we are now ready to undertake the t-testing as provided by the data analysis toolpak of MS Excel. So we press the data tab and then search for the data analysis icon, which can be found at the far right end of the panel. So click data analysis. And then a pop-up window will appear, which shows a variety of analysis tools which we can use. In this case, the one important to us is the t-test, which assumes 2 samples with unequal variances. And as you can see, that's already highlighted here, so I just press OK. And then what I do is I try to input the values for the table of values that we have into the pop-up window. And so I highlight the column for H and do the same thing for the column for D. For the hypothesized mean difference, I put here the average value equal to 6, which is just the figure stated in the null hypothesis. And then since our table of values includes the first row, which indicates the name of the variables, so I also put a check mark on the label square. The alpha um, the alpha square gives a figure of 0.05, which indicates a level of significance uh, which is equal to 5%. And finally, I specify the location of our summary output, which in this case I assume I will put at um, the cell A21. And so after that, I press OK. And right away, you will see uh, a summary output for our t-test. There are some elements here that are not really important for our testing. So in particular, I will just delete the column for the d variable. And for the row uh, indicating hypothesized mean difference, I will edit this to just show hypothesized mean. And so we are now ready to interpret the values in our summary output. So the mean of the values as found in the column for H is 6.31. The variance is approximately 1.59, 1.459. The number of observations is 10. The hypothesized mean, as mentioned in the null hypothesis, is 6. The degree of freedom is equal to n minus 1, or in this case, 10 minus 1, which is equal to 9. And the item important to us is the t-statistic, which in this case is equal to 0.811647. And since we are making use of a two-tailed test, the next item that is important to us is the t-critical two-tailed. And I will highlight that. Okay. It has a value of 2.262157, and direct comparison of those two values give us the result that since the t-statistic is very much less than the t-critical two-tail, we now reach the conclusion that we do not reject the null hypothesis, okay, and conclude that there is no evidence coming from the sample set that the average number of hours of sleep is different 6 hours. So again, we got this conclusion by direct comparison of the t-statistic, which is very much lower than the t-critical two-tailed value. We could have arrived at this same conclusion by looking at the p-value for the two-tailed test. So this is the number here that I'm indicating by arrow is the p-value for our t-test. And so since the p-value, as indicated here in the summary output, which is equal to 0.437933, is very much greater than the level of significance that is indicated in our test, we also conclude by consideration of this information that we do not reject the null hypothesis and conclude that there is no evidence from the sample that the average number of hours of sleep is different from 6 hours. And so that ends our t-test, and thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.